Okay, this is comparing fractions. So yesterday we were looking at fractions on a number line and they were always equivalent. Today, they're not going to be equivalent and we're going to have to find out which fraction is bigger and which one is smaller. So we are doing greater than and less than or equal to fractions. Now, sometimes it's pretty simple. Sometimes it's a little trickier. So I'm going to be showing you 3 ways that you can do this. First, let's look at 1/4 and compare it to 5/8. The question I need to know, or the answer I need to know, is which one is bigger? What I do first is I go, well, anytime on a number line, if they have the same denominator, all I have to do is look at the numerator. So the first trick to figuring this out is making the denominators match. In this case, can 4 become an 8?
Yes.
Yeah, what do I have to do to 4?
Times 2.
Multiply that times 2. 4 times 2 would be 8. 1 times 2 is 2. So 2/8 versus 5/8. Which is bigger?
5/8.
5 is bigger than 2. So getting those denominators to match will make your comparisons a lot easier. Let's try another one that's the same kind of concept. What about 4/5 versus 7/10? 4/5, 7/10. That 5 can become a 10, right?
Yes.
Yes. Times 2. So 5 times 2 is 10. 4 times 2 is 8. So what's bigger, 7 or 8?
8.
So in this case, 4/5 is greater. Now, sometimes I don't have to try and make the denominators match because it's very obvious. Let's say, for example, 1/4 versus 5/6. First off, can I make my 4 turn into a 6? No. So here's my next step. Here's my next way of solving this. When I can't make the denominators match, I then go, okay, well, first off, 1/4 is pretty small. In fact, it's less than a half because a half would be 2/4, right? So 1/4 is less than a half. 5/6, well, 3/6 would be a half, right? 5/6 is more than a half. So without having to do anything, I can just notice that this is more than half, this is less than half. So this must be greater. You just have to figure out what the halves are. Now, if you have something like 1/3, there's not really a half for 1/3, so that's going to be a little trickier. But if I were to have something like 1/3 versus 2/12, 2/12 is way less than a half, but the denominator, it kind of becomes opposite day with fractions. The bigger your denominator is, the more pieces you have of one thing. Because remember, we're all envisioning the same sized cookie. It's the same size cookie for everything. So I'm cutting this cookie into 12 pieces, and I'm getting 2 of them. Imagine that in your head. Those are some small pieces, right? Whereas this cookie, the same size, I'm cutting into 3 pieces, and I'm getting 1 of them. That's a whole lot more. So when I look at my denominators, and when I see a large denominator and a small numerator, I know that's going to be pretty small. The closer your numerator is to your denominator, the closer it is to being a whole. So in this case, 1/3 is bigger than 2/12. It is greater than. So let's look at some practice. 3/4 versus 6/8. 3/4, 6/8. In this case, I can almost do it in my head. I can make that 4 turn into an 8. Because the first thing, if I look, 2/4 is half and 4/8 is half. Both of these are greater than a half. So I can't really use that technique to help me out. But I can change the 4 to an 8 by multiplying by 2. So that becomes 6/8. They are equivalent. Uh-huh. What about 1/4 versus 1/10? Again, here's the rule where you look at how far apart your numerator and denominator are. 1 out of 4 pieces? Okay. 1 out of 10 pieces?
No.
That's very small. So just by that, I can tell 1/4 is going to be bigger. You just got to imagine that cookie in your head. 3/5 versus 5/10. 5/10. Okay, now I know 5/10 is a half, right? 3/5, that's kind of hard to do halves with an odd number because really half of 5 is 2.5. So technically this is a little bit more than a half. But just to be sure, just in case, I can do times 2 and make this become a 10 and this become a 6. So 6/10 would be greater than 5/10. Now here's one more I'm going to show you. And I'm going to show you what to do when you come across this. 1/2 versus 4/5. Okay, first off, this is a half. 4/5 is kind of hard to do it half again. But I know that 4/5 is super close. Like super duper close. And this is half. So when I see how close I am to a whole and I know that this is half, I can already tell that that's going to be greater. But what if I have something like, let's say, 4/5 versus 7/8? They're both 1 away. It's almost a whole. This one's almost a whole. Can I make a 5 turn into an 8? They are not equal. Can I make a 5 turn into an 8?
No.
No. So here's what you do. I have to change both of my denominators. I have to find that common factor that they share. And the easiest way to do that is to multiply it by each other. So I'm going to do 5 times 8 over here and 8 times 5 over here. That way, both of my denominators become 40. So 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 5 is 40. What's 8 times 4?
32.
32. What's 7 times 5?
35.
You see how close these two are? 32 versus 35.
30.
So which is bigger?
35.
35. So 7/8 is bigger by just a little bit. So when you come across a problem where both of them are greater than half, both of them are 1 away from being a whole, neither one of them can be changed to match the other one, they both have to be changed. And the easiest way to do that is go, okay, well, 5 times 8 and 8 times 5. And whatever I do at the bottom, I do to the top. I'm making a much bigger fraction now, but that gives me that 32 versus 35. There will be some that you do where it is like say 24/40 and 25/40. Like that close. So this is definitely something you're going to need to do to solve some of these. So your options are make one denominator match the other, and therefore you're adjusting the numerator as well. To find the half point and see if one is greater than and one is less than a half point. And then to change both of the denominators if they won't match together. Got it?
Yes.
It's not so bad. So when we're looking here on your Daily Common Core, you have plenty of room off to the side here to change the denominators if you need to. Sometimes you can just take a look at it and you can tell right away. You'll be surprised how easy this becomes when you start getting the hang of it. Of course, that usually applies to most things in life. We good?
Yeah.
No freakouts?
No.
Okay.